They said she died in an accident, but I don't believe in accidents. Not when it comes to people like Flora Grant, or the men who claim to love them. So I came to her funeral, not to mourn, but to ask questions no one else would dare. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, make sure to hit subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for being here. Now, let's dive into the story. I hadn't seen San Francisco in nearly a decade. I stood at the edge of Greenwood Cemetery with a busted umbrella, soaked to the bone, watching a procession of strangers dressed in couture and grief file toward the casket. The city skyline loomed behind them like a silent witness, glass and steel blurred by rain. Flora had always belonged to that world, expensive, elevated, out of reach. I didn't. Not then, not now. The last time we'd spoken, she hung up on me. The cab ride from the bus station felt like a blur. The driver had tried to make small talk. Asked if I needed help finding someone. I think he thought I was a mourner. I didn't correct him. My reflection in his rearview mirror looked like hell, dark circles under my eyes, hair slicked down from the storm, collar wrinkled from hours curled against a window seat. But it wasn't grief that hollowed me out. It was the absence of closure. I wasn't here to say goodbye. I was here because the story didn't add up. Flora's death, single car crash, wet roads, no foul play suspected, had arrived in my inbox in a cold templated message from a lawyer I hadn't heard from since I was 15. What it didn't contain was something I recognized in my gut the second I read it: truth. The funeral had already started by the time I reached the gates. I kept my head down and moved through the rows of mourners like a ghost. The scent of lilies thick in the air. Too many people, too many suits, too many cameras hiding in black umbrellas. Flora had always had a talent for collecting the powerful. She was raised to be admired, not loved. Not like I had been. The moment I stepped into view of the casket, I felt it, a subtle shift in atmosphere. Like a drop in pressure. Heads turned. Eyes found mine. Some blinked, others stared like they were watching someone rise from the dead. A woman in the second row gasped. An older man paled and muttered something in a language I hadn't heard in years. One man even stood, his chair scraping across the slick grass. I didn't stop walking. I knew what they were seeing. Me, a mirror, a memory, an echo. Flora and I weren't twins. We barely qualified as sisters. But we shared a face, or parts of one. Same eyes. Same mouth. Same chin, if you tilted your head just right. I was the version of her forged by foster homes and silence. She was the one who got pearls before puberty. And yet for a heartbeat I could see it, in their faces, in the collective silence that followed my footsteps. They thought she had come back. Until I spoke. "I'm Ruth Parquette," I said clearly, stopping near the casket. "Flora's stepsister." The air snapped. A wave of whispers spread behind me like dry grass catching flame. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I could feel the stares searing into my back, the ripples of confusion turning into speculation. And that's when I saw him. Nathan Wyatt. The fiancé. The golden boy of Silicon Valley. The man whose name had once trended higher than Flora's. He stood at the front of the mourners, alone beneath a black umbrella. A red rose was pinned to the lapel of his suit, stark against the monochrome world around him. Rain speckled his shoulders. His jaw was clenched tight, his eyes dark and unreadable. But when he saw me, really saw me, something cracked behind his expression. Hope. Horror. Recognition, and the denial that followed. He took one step forward, then another. His bodyguard moved, but Nathan raised a hand to stop him. The distance between us closed, but I stayed still. His voice, when it came, was low. Hoarse. "You're not her." "No," I said. "I'm what's left." He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to extract the truth from the shape of my face. Then, quieter. "She never said anything. She told me there was no family. No sister." She lied. The service wrapped up in a fog of murmurs. People avoided me. Or watched me. Sometimes both. No one asked questions, not out loud anyway, but I heard them in the half-sentences exchanged in undertones, behind hands. "Looks just like her." I thought Flora was an only child. This isn't on the program. The tension thickened like fog. It clung to the suits, the silence, the expensive grief. I approached the casket after the others began to drift away. Nathan hadn't moved. His eyes followed me with the precision of someone used to control, but I saw the fracture underneath. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. It was sealed with wax. Flora's initials etched into the back. I slid it into the bouquet of white lilies resting on the casket lid and leaned in just enough to whisper, "You wanted this hidden. But I'm done with secrets." I turned and walked out through the mist. In a motel room smelling of bleach and bad cable TV later that night, I'm replaying the voicemail that should have never existed, Flora's last message. Her voice, unsteady and afraid, whispering through static. They're watching me. If anything happens, tell him the numbers don't add up. I didn't come here for closure. I came for the truth. And I wasn't leaving without it. The cemetery was empty by the time Nathan returned to the casket. Rain slicked the marble headstones, falling in a quiet hush that made the city feel miles away. He hadn't planned to come back, not tonight, not alone, but something about the woman's face, about Ruth, refused to let him go. The envelope lay nestled among the lilies, half hidden but unmistakable. He pulled it out with careful fingers, already soaked to the bone, the wax seal pressing red against pale parchment. He didn't open it right away. He just stood there, staring at the familiar seal, Flora's initials, embossed in the kind of dramatic wax she used for letters she never sent. The paper was thick, real stationery, the kind you don't buy unless you expect someone to remember it. His fingers shook only slightly as he broke the seal. Inside, her handwriting was unmistakable, sharp and slanted, with that slight rightward tilt. She always wrote like she was in a hurry, like the world might end before she reached the final word. If you're reading this, it's already too late. Tell him the numbers don't add up. R. He read it again. And then a third time. It wasn't addressed to him. It was meant for Ruth. The message meant nothing on the surface. But it dropped something cold into the pit of his stomach. Flora had said something once, weeks before the crash, something about the company's charitable arm, about numbers not lining up. He dismissed it at the time. Just another tangent in a long list of passionate, half-formed concerns. He could still hear her voice, laughing nervously over wine. They're not just moving donations, Nathan. They're shuffling them like cards. It's too clean, too symmetrical. Numbers aren't supposed to look that perfect. He told her she was overthinking it. She had a habit of chasing ghosts. Except now she was the one buried, and the ghost chasing him wore her face. Across the city, Ruth replayed the voicemail again. She was on her sixth listen. Sitting on the edge of a stiff motel bed, the cheap kind that groaned every time she shifted, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and the hiss of water in the pipes behind the walls. They're watching me. If anything happens. Then, nothing. Just the abrupt end of a voice cut short. She let the phone drop into her lap and stared at the ceiling. There was a crack above the light fixture shaped like a lightning bolt. The kind you'd never notice unless you were looking for patterns in everything. She'd been doing that since she was 8. The lawyer's email had come out of nowhere. A line about next of kin. A brief mention of her stepsister's death. A file attached with 3 items, a voicemail backup, a scanned death certificate, and a photo of a broken tablet. She'd known, the second she listened to Flora's voice, that the story wasn't over. It hadn't even started. The envelope had been a test. Nathan had taken the bait. She was sure of it. The next morning, the fog over the inner Richmond district clung to the buildings like a secret. Ruth chose a cafe with windows and exits. Always exits. She arrived 10 minutes early, ordered coffee she didn't want, and claimed a table in the corner. Her coat was still damp from the walk over, her hair pulled back without thought. She didn't bother fixing herself in the reflection of the glass. If Nathan Wyatt expected polished grief, he picked the wrong sister. He arrived with a kind of presence that turned heads, tall, controlled, the suit sharp enough to draw blood. He didn't smile. Didn't offer condolences. Just pulled the envelope from his coat and laid it on the table between them like an unspoken question. You recognize the handwriting? She asked, tapping one finger against her coffee cup. I do. Then you know she meant it for me. He watched her for a long moment. Then, with a kind of calm that sounded more like accusation than inquiry, he said, Flora told me there was no family. No one left. She edited the truth. Must run in the company. She didn't mention you. Not once. Not in 2 years. That's not the same thing as not existing. His fingers brushed the edge of the envelope again. What does it mean? You tell me. Her voice sharpened, but didn't rise. You controlled her world. You signed off on her budgets. What numbers was she talking about? She mentioned something. Once. Foundation ledgers. But it was vague. She left that note before she died. She was paranoid. She was scared. His jaw tensed. You think I killed her? I think billionaires don't lose sleep over pretty lies, unless someone's pulling their strings. The silence between them pulsed. Then Ruth pulled her phone from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. One tap, and the voicemail crackled to life. They're watching me. If anything happens. She let it play out. Watched his reaction. He didn't flinch. But his eyes didn't leave hers. She recorded that 3 days before the crash, Ruth said softly. She didn't send it. Didn't trust anyone enough to. You hacked her phone? I received her personal effects. This was buried in a hidden backup. I see. Nathan stood slowly, slipping the envelope back into his coat. I don't know what you're trying to find, he said. But I don't think it's me. Ruth didn't blink. Maybe not. He slid a business card across the table. If you get something real, something that's not just grief with a side of conspiracy, bring it to me. Then he walked out, not looking back. She stared at the card for a long time. Wyatt International. Executive Suite. She slipped it into her pocket. Later that morning, Nathan sat behind the glass walls of his corner office with the city below him. He couldn't focus. The letter was still in his coat pocket. The voicemail still echoed in his skull. He opened the company's internal database and pulled up the foundation's quarterly reports. There were thousands of entries, donations, audits, media assets, social initiatives. Flora had flagged one the month before she died. A single entry, $7.2 million transferred to a clean water initiative in Mozambique. At first glance, it looked legitimate. But the money had passed through 3 subsidiaries, holding companies with generic names and cross-border accounts. The routing system was too clean. Almost engineered. He checked the audit trail. All approvals led back to one name, Adrian Holt. Nathan leaned back in his chair and pressed the intercom. Where's Adrian? He asked. His assistant's voice was thin. He left before 9. Didn't say where. He missed the 10 a.m. briefing. Pull security footage. I want eyes on him from the minute he walked in. Yes, sir. He ended the call and sat in silence. His empire had been built on foresight, on controlling every variable before it became a threat. But something was unraveling, and it had Flora's fingerprints on it. And now Ruth's. Back at the motel, Ruth sat on the bed with her knees tucked under her. The tablet she'd been trying to crack for days had finally opened, the screen flickering slightly, but intact. She'd bypassed the password encryption using a backdoor, a trick she'd learned from an old consulting job. It hadn't been easy. Flora had hidden her secrets well. The file she found was labeled Red Thread. Inside, Ruth found spreadsheets, donation summaries, internal company memos, screenshots of wire transfers routed through obscure foundations and charities. Some of the organizations didn't even have websites. One name repeated in the metadata again and again, Wyatt International. She exhaled slowly. So Flora had been right. And Nathan had lied to himself. Ruth reached into her duffel and pulled out a flash drive. She copied the files, encrypted them, and sent a backup to her secure cloud server. Then she stared at the screen for a long time, heart hammering against her ribs. Her sister hadn't been paranoid. She hadn't been spiraling. She'd been hunted. And Ruth had just stepped into the center of it. The motel's Wi-Fi was barely strong enough to stream music, but it was enough for Ruth to work. The tablet Flora had left behind, cracked on one corner, faint scorch marks along the side, was finally yielding its secrets. It had taken her 2 days, a virtual machine, and an encryption bypass tool she wasn't supposed to still have, but the shell finally cracked. The interface blinked once, then opened. Inside, buried beneath decoy folders labeled recipes and vacation photos, was a directory marked in all lowercase, Red Thread. Ruth's heart slowed as her eyes scanned the contents. Spreadsheets. Financial documents. Internal memos. A familiar ledger layout caught her eye, a corporate accounting format she recognized from freelance contracts. She tapped one open. At first, it looked clean. A basic donation trail through one of Wyatt International's charitable foundations. But the numbers were too balanced, too clean. Corporate accounting never looked like this unless someone had scrubbed it. She kept digging. A set of offshore account numbers sat buried in metadata. Funds had moved from Wyatt subsidiaries to charities, then quietly rerouted through shell companies registered to places with no extradition treaties. One of the names on a digital signature was Holt Adler Investments. Ruth's pulse stuttered. Adrian Holt. Nathan's CFO. She leaned back, screen light casting long shadows across the motel bedspread. The air in the room suddenly felt too still. If Flora had found this, if she'd been close to exposing it, someone had motive to silence her. Ruth opened her encrypted email and sent a zip file of the documents to herself. Then she sent a second copy to a secure offshore inbox tied to a contact only 2 people in her world knew. Just in case. Across the city, Nathan stared at the glowing skyline through the wall of his penthouse office. He hadn't slept. He'd replayed the conversation with Ruth half a dozen times, each time catching something new, the way she said scared, not paranoid. The voicemail. The look in her eyes. She wasn't bluffing. His gut said she was right. He tapped a line on his private comms. Reopen the Grant crash file. I want the original accident report, traffic camera logs, forensic photos. All of it. Don't run it through corporate. Keep it internal. The man on the other end hesitated. You think something was missed? I think someone made sure it wasn't found. He ended the call and walked to the window, heart beating harder than it should. He didn't like loose ends. Never had. And Ruth Parquet was starting to feel less like an intruder, and more like the only person in the room not pretending everything was fine. Ruth heard the knock at 2:03 a.m. Not a friendly tap. Not the uncertain shuffle of motel staff. This was 3 quick raps. Sharp. Intentional. She grabbed the flash drive off the table and shoved it into her coat pocket, then cracked the door an inch. Nathan stood outside, rain on his coat collar, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, 2 men in dark jackets loitered near a black SUV. Your security detail really knows how to make an entrance, she said. I don't like surprises, he replied. And I don't like being hacked. Ruth opened the door the rest of the way. Then you shouldn't bury crimes in spreadsheets. Nathan stepped inside before she could change her mind. The room smelled like damp carpet and motel soap. His eyes went straight to the tablet still glowing on the bed. You went through her files, he said. She left them for me. They're company property. No, Ruth folded her arms. They were her property. Your company just happened to be the one she was investigating when she died. Nathan's jaw flexed. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Holt Adler Investments is a shell entity. I know Wyatt funds were funneled through fake charities. I know the same signature appears on every routing slip. He took a step closer, his voice lower now. You broke the law accessing that data. She didn't back down. And someone broke her neck making sure no one else did. The silence between them was a loaded gun. Outside, a car hissed past on wet asphalt. Somewhere down the hall, a faucet dripped. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. You think I'm behind this? I think someone in your company is. I think Flora got too close. And I think if you really believed this was all in her head, you wouldn't be here in the middle of the night. She saw it then, just a flicker, the crack beneath his control. A moment of hesitation in his eyes. Not guilt. Not fear. Doubt. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her. Same sharp cheekbones. Same mouth. But where Flora had been soft-spoken, Ruth was steel. There was a fire in her that burned clean through pretense. You're not like her, he said quietly. Ruth's mouth twitched. Flora always hated conflict. I'm what happens when you grow up expecting it. He didn't respond. Not with words. But his shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Enough for Ruth to realize he hadn't come here to threaten her. He'd come for the truth. Even if it terrified him. I want everything you found, he said. Tomorrow. In person. Not sending it over email, she asked. You afraid someone's watching? I know someone is. He turned, pulling the door open. Rain painted shadows across his face. 9 a.m. My office, he said. Then he was gone. Ruth stared at the empty doorway, heart still racing. She'd seen the look in his eyes, the shift from confrontation to realization. Whatever secrets Flora had died for, Ruth wasn't the only one chasing them now. She didn't sleep. Ruth sat with her back against the motel wall, legs pulled up, the glow of the decrypted tablet flickering against her knees. She'd locked the door, wedged a chair beneath the handle, even stacked 2 empty suitcases by the window like she could barricade the world out. It wasn't paranoia. Paranoia was irrational. This was survival. Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper. The kind that tricked you into letting your guard down. But her mind ran too fast for rest. She kept replaying Nathan's face, the sharp shift in his expression when she accused him, then the softer shadow that followed when he saw she wasn't bluffing. She didn't know if she trusted him, but he hadn't looked away from the truth. Not once. Somewhere near 4 a.m., the exhaustion finally caught up to her. She slipped into a shallow sleep on top of the bedspread, one hand still curled around the flash drive in her coat pocket. She woke an hour later to the sound of wood splintering. The door. It cracked open in silence, not force. Clean. Deliberate. She sat up fast, heart in her throat, but it was already too late. The room was empty again when she flipped the light on. Chair still against the door. Window still locked. No broken glass. No footsteps. But the laptop was gone. The flash drive, too. She tore through her coat, her bags, the bedding, panic rising with every second, but both were missing. And something else was there instead. Lying in the center of the bedspread, placed so gently it might have been offered. A single white rose. Fresh. No note. No explanation. Just the flower. Flora's favorite. Ruth stood frozen, breath held, spine rigid. Her pulse beat in her teeth. The room smelled faintly of rain. And perfume. He didn't wait for a text. Nathan was already in the SUV when she called. Her voice was brittle. Not panicked. Worse, controlled. "I need to see you," she said. "Now." 15 minutes later, he stepped through the shattered frame of her motel door and saw the storm she wasn't saying out loud. The room was stripped bare. The tablet was gone. So was the flash drive. But it was the flower that made his blood run cold. He picked it up slowly, thumb brushing the stem. White rose. Ruth nodded. Flora's favorite. Yes. He met her eyes. "I don't believe in coincidences," she said. "Neither do I." She didn't ask for help. But she didn't argue when he told her to pack a bag. The penthouse was made of glass and silence. Rain slid down the floor-to-ceiling windows in long vertical streams, turning the skyline into a smear of silver and gold. Ruth stood in the middle of it, duffel slung over her shoulder, looking entirely out of place in a space built for power. Nathan poured her a whiskey without asking. She didn't take it. "I don't like being protected," she said. "I'm not protecting you." "Really?" "I'm protecting the investigation." That made her smile, thin and sharp. "Of course. All about the mission." He raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm using you?" "I think you're using this," she said, gesturing to the apartment, the storm, the expensive safety of it all. "To control the story." He didn't deny it. But he set the whiskey down and leaned on the counter, watching her with a tired intensity she hadn't seen before. "You said Flora lied," he said finally. "About family. About you." She didn't lie. She just erased me. "Why?" Ruth hesitated, then pulled off her coat and sat down. "We had the same mother. For 5 years. Then divorce tore the house in half. Flora got the weekends with her, the ballet lessons, the prep schools. I got foster care and food stamps. And no contact. Some." She looked away. "Birthday cards for a few years. Then nothing." "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because I reminded her where she came from. And she was trying to build something cleaner." He exhaled. A sound halfway between understanding and guilt. She never talked about her childhood. Not once. She was ashamed. "You sound angry." "I'm not." Ruth leaned forward, resting her elbows on the countertop between them. "I envied her. Sure. But I didn't hate her. Not really. Flora was soft. She needed the world to feel safe. I learned pretty young that it wasn't." He looked at her differently then, not like someone across enemy lines, but like someone who'd lived through a different war entirely. "You still don't believe her death was an accident," he said. "No. And you still think someone inside Wyatt International wanted her gone?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then we find out who." A beat passed. It settled between them like a contract. Not alliance. Not trust. But something close. Later, the city lay beneath them like a painting. Ruth sat near the window, barefoot, a glass of water untouched beside her. Nathan stood at the edge of the kitchen, half in shadow, shirt sleeves rolled, collar open. The conversation had stopped hours ago, but the tension hadn't. Not the angry kind. The other kind. She glanced back toward him. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A man who'd cover up a crime to save his empire." "And instead." "You're not sure what the truth is, but you want it anyway." He walked closer, slow, quiet. "And what about you?" he asked. "What about me? What do you want?" She looked up at him. The space between them small. The weight of grief and proximity and unspoken understanding stretching taut. "Justice," she said. "For her. For me. For whatever she died trying to uncover." Their eyes held for a breath longer than necessary. Then Nathan nodded once, as if anchoring them both to something real. "No more secrets," he said. "No more lies," she added. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. But inside the glass tower, something had shifted. They weren't just chasing ghosts anymore. They were hunting together. Adrian Holt was waiting in Nathan's office before he arrived. He never did that. The CFO sat in a chair near the window, hands folded neatly over one knee, staring out at the skyline like he owned it. He didn't turn around when Nathan entered, didn't even flinch when the door clicked shut behind him. Nathan crossed the room in silence. "You called an emergency meeting." "I'm here," he said. Adrian rose slowly, adjusted his cufflinks, and turned. His expression was calm, too calm. Measured, polished. Every word that followed felt pre-rehearsed, like it had been practiced in a mirror. "I need you to drop the crash investigation." Nathan didn't blink. "That's not your decision." "It is if it compromises the company," Adrian replied, voice smooth as water over stone. "This renewed interest in Flora's death is attracting attention. The wrong kind. I didn't realize the truth was bad for PR. It is when you start dragging ghosts out of graves." Nathan leaned on the desk, eyes narrowing. "You know something?" Adrian gave him a patient look. "I know that this company has survived because we don't chase shadows. We let them fade." Something cold unfurled in Nathan's chest. Flora wasn't a shadow. "She's dead," Adrian said simply. "Don't join her." There was a long pause. Then he picked up his briefcase, nodded once, and left without another word. Nathan watched the door for a full minute after it closed. Then he picked up the phone. "Get me the full audit log on Adrian Holt's approvals for the last 18 months, he said. "Restricted access. No one else sees it." Ruth didn't sleep that night either. She sat cross-legged on the floor of the penthouse guest room, surrounded by screenshots, decrypted files, and handwritten notes. The wall beside her had become a pinboard, lines drawn in red, names circled, timelines arranged like puzzle pieces she hadn't quite fitted together. And at the center of it all, Adrian Holt. The financial trails led back to him every time. Flora's file showed a dozen instances of large payments, millions at a time, authorized by Adrian through layers of fake nonprofits. On paper, they were earmarked for tech donations, education programs, global health. But the money always disappeared. Vanished into shell accounts connected to companies Ruth traced back to the defense sector. Black budget contracts. Prototype weapons. Surveillance systems. Military tech. It was corporate laundering. And Flora had found it. Nathan's phone rang just after 3 a.m. The voice on the other end was low. Grim. "Sir. Adrian Holt is dead." He was found slumped in his luxury sedan, parked 2 blocks from his condo, engine still running. The initial report said suicide. Carbon monoxide poisoning. The garage door had been closed. But Nathan didn't believe it for a second. He was already moving before the call ended. By the time they reached the scene, police had sealed it off. Yellow tape cut through the dark like a warning. The air reeked of exhaust and something colder, like the tail end of grief that hadn't settled yet. Ruth stood beside Nathan, watching from the edge of the perimeter. "He was scared," Nathan said. "Earlier today. I saw it. But not enough to run. Not enough to kill himself." Ruth's eyes didn't leave the car. "Same model as Flora's." He glanced at her. "You sure?" "I remember the rims. That year, that make. Identical." Nathan's stomach dropped. "What else?" She stepped closer to the car, noting the detail work. "Police reports said mechanical failure in Flora's crash, right?" "Yeah." She pointed to the garage floor. "Oil stain," she said. "Too clean. Too precise. It's a planted leak. Same signature." Nathan didn't speak. Because now he saw it too. This wasn't coincidence. It was replication. A message. Ruth's voice dropped to a whisper. "Whoever did this, they're not covering tracks anymore. They're sending warnings." They returned to the penthouse just before dawn. Nathan poured 2 drinks but neither of them touched theirs. Ruth paced the room, tension radiating from her shoulders. He knew something. He was trying to warn you, but he didn't realize he was already marked. Nathan leaned against the glass wall, staring out at a city that suddenly looked foreign. "He told me to stop digging. Said I was dragging ghosts out of graves." Maybe he wasn't talking about Flora. He turned. She handed him a tablet. "Look at this." He scanned the open file, an authorization form signed by Adrian. The money trail led to a shell company called Keystone Strategic Holdings. Keystone's listed as a logistics firm, Ruth said. But dig deeper, and it's a front. They're subcontracted under a government deal for drone weapons testing. And the last payout. 2 weeks before Flora died. Nathan clenched his jaw. She got too close. Adrian probably thought he could shield her. But someone else decided it was easier to erase the problem. Nathan's hand tightened around the glass until it cracked. Just before sunrise, Ruth's second phone lit up. One message. No name. Got something. Check your Dropbox. M. She opened her laptop, fingers flying. M was her old contact. A forensic data retrieval expert. Paranoid. Brilliant. Anonymous even to her. The file was heavy, video footage, partially corrupted, pulled from the dashcam metadata on Flora's recovered tablet. It hadn't been stored on the drive. It had been hidden in the system partition. Ruth decrypted the file and hit play. The footage showed the winding coastal road where Flora's car had gone off the bridge. Everything looked normal, until the frame glitched. Then, headlights. Behind her. Tailgating. A second car. Unmarked. Dark. No plates. Staying just close enough to be deliberate. The timestamp matched the exact minute the crash was reported. Ruth stared at the frozen frame, breath held. There was no mistake now. Flora hadn't lost control. She'd been hunted. Pushed. Nathan saw it too. His hand gripped the back of Ruth's chair as he leaned in, jaw locked. They killed her. She looked up at him, eyes hard. And now they're cleaning house. The message came through at 2:14 a.m. No sender. No subject. Just 5 words, black text on white. Stop digging or join her. Nathan stared at the screen, jaw tight, fists clenched. There were things that could be ignored, rumors, missteps, even sabotage. But this wasn't noise. This was war. He checked the sender trace, burned through a layered VPN and a relay server in Singapore. No return path. Whoever sent it was no amateur. He deleted the message, then paused. No. Not deleted. Archived. He wasn't letting it go. By morning, 3 more emails had come in. One with a screenshot of the dashcam footage Ruth had shown him. Another with a photo of Flora, standing outside the Wyatt Foundation, time-stamped a week before her death. And the last, a blurry still from the motel hallway Ruth had been staying in. She was walking toward her room. Alone. Unaware of the camera overhead. Whoever was watching wasn't bluffing. They were close. Inside his world. He looked around his office, suddenly aware of how many doors he left unlocked. How many people he once trusted without question. The circle was shrinking. Fast. He made the call just after noon. I want the estate prepped. Top floor rooms cleaned. Full lockdown. Yes, sir, Marcus Dean said. Should I ask what prompted this? You shouldn't. Nathan ended the call. An hour later, he was standing in front of Ruth with a bag already packed. You're not safe here, he said. And if they know where you are, that means I've already waited too long. Ruth raised an eyebrow. So you're taking me to your villain lair in the countryside? Something like that. She didn't argue. She just zipped the duffel shut and followed him out the door. The estate sat miles outside the city, nestled in the coastal hills, far from traffic, press, and boardrooms full of vultures. It was once his mother's retreat, red brick, wraparound porch, windows that watched the world instead of hiding from it. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. The first thing Ruth noticed when they arrived was how quiet it was. No staff. Just Marcus Dean waiting at the door, all crisp professionalism and practiced stillness. His eyes didn't linger on her, but they didn't miss her either. I thought you had a full team out here, Ruth said later, once they were inside. I sent them home, Nathan replied. Didn't want too many eyes. Or mouths. He didn't answer. But she saw it anyway, tension. Not just in him. In the walls. In the way Marcus kept glancing at his phone. In the cameras that suddenly looked like they weren't just for show. She didn't unpack. Flora's old room was still intact. It hadn't been touched since she died. Dust gathered in the corners, but the bed was still made, the books still stacked beside the nightstand, the little vial of perfume still sitting on the dresser like she might walk in at any moment and spritz it on her wrist. Ruth stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. She touched nothing at first. Just walked slowly, memorizing the space her sister once called a sanctuary. Then something caught her eye, a thin seam along the baseboard. Out of place. Warped slightly from moisture. She knelt and pressed her fingers underneath. The panel popped loose. Inside were 3 journals. Each worn, pages warped by time and ink. She opened the most recent one. Flora's handwriting, unmistakable. The last entry was dated 2 days before her death. I'm meeting Adrian. He says he has the proof, that it wasn't Nathan. That he can clear him. I want to believe him. I need to. But something doesn't feel right. I just hope I'm not wrong about this. I can't protect both of them. Ruth's throat tightened. She sat down on the bed, journal clutched in her hands, the ache of regret sharper than before. Flora had trusted Adrian. And it got her killed. Night fell like velvet over the estate. Outside, the sky was gunmetal gray, heavy with unshed rain. Inside, the lights were low, casting long shadows across the library where Nathan and Ruth sat in uneasy silence. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Not for comfort. For distraction. He poured a second drink, handed it to her without a word. She took it this time. What was she like, with you? Ruth asked after a long moment. Nathan leaned back, gaze unfocused. Warm. Careful. She always wanted to fix things. Make the world a little gentler than it really was. She ever tell you about our mother? He shook his head. She was fire and knives, Ruth said. She'd kiss you goodnight one day, disappear for 3 the next. Flora hated how chaotic it was. I think that's why she loved men like you. Order. Clean lines. Nathan glanced at her. And you? I learned to stop waiting for good things. And start finding the cracks. He was quiet. Then, almost softly, I don't know how much of her I actually knew. She didn't lie to you, Ruth said. She just showed you the version of herself that made sense in your world. He looked at her. Really looked. You're not like her. No. But you see her clearer than I ever did. She didn't reply. The silence stretched, not awkward, but heavy. His eyes lingered on her mouth. Her hand. The way she curled her fingers around the glass, like she wasn't sure whether to drink or throw it. He stepped forward, slow. The air between them shifted, electric, uncertain. But when he leaned in, Ruth didn't move. Just whispered. She was your fiancée. And she was your sister. Nathan froze. Breath caught. Ruth's voice was softer now. Sadder. She was your ghost, she said. And mine too. He stepped back. Not out of rejection. But guilt. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Neither of them spoke again that night. But they stayed in the library until the flames died. 2 souls shaped by the same woman, haunted by different parts of her. Neither knowing that somewhere in the dark, Marcus Dean was watching. The storm arrived like a warning. By nightfall, the sky had turned black and bruised, wind lashing against the estate's windows, trees bowing as thunder rolled low and steady across the hills. Nathan stood at the window of his late mother's study, watching the first streak of lightning split the sky. Behind him, the power flickered. Once. Twice. Then held. The air was dense. Electric. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Ruth entered without knocking. She was barefoot, hair damp from a shower, sleeves pushed up. The lights keep dimming, she said. That normal? No. She joined him at the window, eyes searching the dark stretch of property outside. Your guy Marcus, she added. He's been checking the circuit boxes for the past half hour. Alone. Nathan turned slowly. Why didn't you tell me that sooner? I didn't want to assume. You should've. Another flash of lightning lit up the hallway behind them. Then, darkness. The estate went black. The hum of power vanished. The house dropped into absolute silence. No generators. No backup systems. Nathan moved first. Stay here, he said. Not a chance. They moved fast, through the dark corridors of the estate. Nathan knew the house by muscle memory. Ruth followed him closely, silent, steps quick but light. Then a sound, soft, metallic, echoed from the kitchen. A click. A safety being released. Nathan stopped cold. Marcus Dean stepped into view, gun in hand, face unreadable in the flicker of stormlight through the tall windows. He looked like a man who'd already made peace with what came next. I told you not to keep her here, Marcus said quietly. Ruth froze beside Nathan. You picked the wrong side, Nathan said, voice sharp. I picked the winning side, Marcus replied. Until you started digging up the dead. Nathan stepped forward. Put the gun down. Marcus didn't. Instead, he raised it slowly, leveling it at Nathan's chest. Flora figured it out, Marcus said, eyes glassy. She found the defense contracts. The offshore pass-throughs. She followed the money straight to Moreau. Nathan's stomach dropped. You killed her. Marcus didn't deny it. She was going to blow it all open, he said. She didn't care what it cost you. And Adrian? Too close. Too weak. A faint smirk crossed Marcus's lips. He was going to crack. So I cracked him first. You bastard, Ruth whispered. I did what I was told. What I was paid to do. Nathan took a step forward. The gun followed. You don't have to do this. Marcus' jaw twitched. It's too late. You're both too close now. In that second, the tension snapped. Ruth didn't think, she acted. She grabbed a porcelain vase from the side table and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the far wall, drawing Marcus's aim for just a heartbeat. Enough. Nathan lunged. The gun went off, once, then again. Glass exploded behind them. Ruth ducked. The two men crashed into the floor, struggling, fists and elbows and shouts buried under the thunder pounding outside. Marcus was strong, but Nathan had fury behind him. Years of betrayal. Of grief. Of blind trust. The gun skidded across the floor, spinning. Ruth dove for it. By the time she turned back, Nathan had Marcus pinned. Blood smeared his color. Marcus gasped beneath him. Who gave the order? Nathan shouted. Marcus coughed. Laughed, wet and broken. You were never supposed to find her, he rasped. Who gave the order, Marcus? Charles, Marcus choked. Moreau. It was always him. His eyes rolled back. Then nothing. The storm swallowed the silence. By dawn, the power had returned. The body was gone, quietly handled by Nathan's private team. No police. No calls. Just silence and blood wiped clean from the floorboards. But nothing felt clean. Ruth sat in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup gone cold. Her sleeves were speckled with dust. Her face unreadable. Nathan stood at the sink, jaw tight, shirt stained. Neither spoke. What was there to say? Marcus Dean had been with him since the beginning. Trained with him. Guarded him. Trusted with every room, every secret, every weak point. And he'd sold all of it, for a payout and a promise from a man Nathan had called a mentor. He broke the silence first. I should have seen it. No, Ruth said quietly. That's the thing about betrayal. It only works when it comes from someone you never question. Nathan sat across from her, watching her over the rim of his glass. What happens now? She asked. I go after Moreau. He's not going to go quietly. I'm not asking. Ruth looked at him, eyes darker than they'd been the night they met. Not afraid. Not even angry. Just resolute. This isn't just about Flora anymore, she said. I know. She tried to protect you. Even at the end. I know. Ruth reached into her bag and placed Flora's final journal on the table. He stared at it. She didn't die because she was naive, Ruth said. She died because she believed in you. Nathan's hands trembled, just for a second, before he steadied them. She was wrong, he said. Ruth tilted her head. Maybe. But I'm not. Lightning flashed again outside, distant now. The storm had passed. But the war had just begun. The boardroom was colder than usual. Nathan stood at the head of the table, the skyline behind him bruised with early morning fog. 12 chairs. Only 5 were filled. The others, silent resignations in sleek suits. Charles Moreau sat across from him like nothing had changed. Same tailored charcoal suit. Same silver cufflinks. Same expressionless calm he'd worn since Nathan was a teenager standing in his father's shadow. But Nathan wasn't a boy anymore. And he knew what was behind that calm now. Rot. I know about the defense contracts, Nathan said. I know what you used Marcus for. And I know why Flora died. Moreau smiled faintly. Then you also know what happens next. Nathan said nothing. Moreau reached into his leather briefcase and slid a thick manila folder across the polished table. Inside, signed testimonies, doctored ledgers, security footage doctored to frame Ruth. Neatly packaged. Poison gift-wrapped. You'll take the fall, or she will, Moreau said smoothly. You sign over your controlling shares, and the press learns that Ruth Parquet was a rogue hacker with a vendetta. That she murdered Adrian Holt in a fit of paranoia. That Marcus Dean tried to stop her, and died in the process. Nathan's hands tightened around the folder. She's your loose end, Moreau said, still calm. I'm giving you a cleaner one. And if I don't? Moreau leaned back. Then you'll both be tried. And I'll bury you before the jury ever sees the evidence. The silence stretched. Nathan looked down at the pen beside the folder. Sleek. Weighted. His father's. His hand hovered over it. Flora had died believing in him. And he had almost destroyed Ruth trying to prove he was worth it. He picked up the pen. Then. His phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then again. He blinked. Moreau frowned. Nathan turned the screen toward him. Wyatt Empire built on lies, exclusive, Flora Grant's journal reveals cover-up, corporate fraud murder. Live. Trending. Breaking. The news exploded across global outlets in minutes. Flora's journal entries, Flora's encrypted files, footage of the second car chasing her off the bridge, records of Adrian's threats, payment logs tied to Marcustine. Every receipt. Every name. Released. All of it. Nathan looked up. Moreau's face had gone pale. You didn't, he whispered. Nathan didn't smile. But his voice was steady. No, he said. She did. 6 hours earlier, Ruth had stood in the library of the estate, staring at her burner laptop, a single thumb drive plugged in. The screen blinked a warning. Are you sure you want to upload this content to the press distribution node? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The files went live at 3:04 a.m. Flora's words. Her evidence. Her truth. All of it. No redactions. No edits. Ruth didn't tell Nathan. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she knew what he might try to protect. His name. His legacy. Her. But none of it mattered anymore. The world had to see what really happened. What Wyatt International had built on silence, blood, and buried daughters. By mid-morning, the media frenzy was uncontrollable. Cable news anchors were breathless. Stock analysts were apocalyptic. Shareholders dumped billions in assets as Wyatt International's value plummeted in real time. Emergency board calls leaked within minutes. Staff resigned en masse. Moreau's name trended beside Flora's. Wyatt's name trended beside corruption and cover-up. And through it all, Nathan said nothing. He watched his empire burn. And didn't lift a single finger to stop it. Moreau moved fast. But not fast enough. The private jet was fueled, flight plan filed under an alias. The hangar was remote. The staff paid off. It should have been simple. But when he arrived, the authorities were already waiting. And so was Nathan. It wasn't rage on his face. Not satisfaction either. Just resolve. You always needed a war to feel important, Nathan said as the agents cuffed Moreau at the wrists. You just forgot what happens when people stop following orders. Moreau didn't speak. He didn't look back. As the SUV pulled away, Ruth stepped out of the shadows near the hangar doors. Nathan turned toward her. Her hair was windblown. Her coat too thin for the cold. But her eyes were clear. Steady. You did it, he said. We did it, she replied. No, he shook his head. You did what I couldn't. You were trying to protect the wreckage, Ruth said. I was trying to light it on fire. And now? Ruth looked out toward the runway. It's done, she said. But neither of them smiled. The cost was too high. They drove back in silence, the sky above them flat and gray. Nathan didn't return to the penthouse. He didn't return to the boardroom. He handed over control of Wyatt International to a restructured team of independent auditors. He sat through depositions, testimonies, interviews he didn't prepare for. And when it was all over, he walked away. From the company. From the empire. From everything. 3 days later, he found Ruth standing on a hill outside a vineyard north of the city, watching the workers till the soil for the next season. The wind tugged at her sleeves. You're late, she said. I was saying goodbye. She nodded, still facing the rows of vines. And hello. He stepped beside her. I bought this place, he said. It was my mother's. Thought about selling it years ago. Couldn't. It's quiet, Ruth said. It's honest. A long silence. I leaked the files, she said, not apologizing. I know. You almost signed. I know that too. She looked at him. What now? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and handed her a letter. Flora's handwriting. Mailed the morning she died. Ruth opened it slowly. If anything happens to me, tell Ruth she was right. Truth always costs more than silence, but it's worth every drop of blood. F. Ruth folded the letter. Tears didn't fall, but they were there. Waiting. Nathan looked out at the land, the storm far behind them now. I think she'd be proud of you, he said. Ruth shook her head gently. She didn't need me to save her memory, she replied. She needed someone to finish what she started. She turned toward him. You still want to build something? He nodded. With you. Then they walked together, down the row of young vines. Not chasing ghosts, but carrying them. The vines were still young. Green shoots curved up from rows of dark soil, supported by weathered trellises that had been there since Nathan was a boy. The hills rolled gently under a soft October sky, the air crisp with earth and wood smoke. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Nathan stood at the edge of the vineyard, hands in his pockets, jacket dusted with the morning chill. A dog barked somewhere up the hill. A truck rolled past on the gravel road, and for the first time in months, he didn't reach for his phone when it buzzed. There was no boardroom waiting. No press conference. No empire to defend. He'd walked away from Wyatt International 6 months ago, burned the roots and left the ashes behind. The lawsuits were still trickling in, the market still talking, but Nathan didn't care. What needed to fall had fallen. And what was left was here. A vineyard his mother once called her second breath. A future that didn't require a fortress to survive. Behind him, Ruth walked out of the old farmhouse, barefoot on the stone path, 2 mugs in her hands. Her hair was tied back, a few dark strands already escaping in the breeze. "You're up early," she said, handing him one. "Didn't sleep much." "Bad dream." "No. No dream at all." Ruth nodded and took a sip of her coffee. She had a different stillness now, less guarded, but still alert. She hadn't softened. She'd just stopped bracing for the next hit. She looked across the vines, then down at the ground beneath her feet. "I forget how much the earth matters until I stand on it," she said. "Flora used to say something like that," Nathan replied. "She came here. Once. Years ago. She said it was too quiet for her." He smiled faintly. Said the silence made her feel like she had to be honest. Ruth looked at him. "You think that's why she left the letter?" Nathan reached into his coat pocket and pulled it out. Worn now. Folded at the corners. The ink beginning to fade. But the words still hit the same way they did the first time he'd read them. "If anything happens to me, tell Ruth she was right. Truth always costs more than silence, but it's worth every drop of blood. F." Ruth read it again, even though she'd memorized it. It was the last thing Flora ever gave them. And it had been enough. The vineyard reopened on a rainy Sunday in late October. No press. No cameras. Just a handwritten sign out front that read, "Wyatt and Grant Wines." The logo was simple, 2 interlocking vines, one lighter than the other, the initials carved into the wood with care. They invited local growers. Journalists who'd reported the truth. Families who'd lost jobs when the scandal broke. People who believed that rebuilding didn't have to mean forgetting. Ruth stood beneath a wide green umbrella near the edge of the tasting barn, talking with a former investigative reporter from Prague who was now writing a book about whistleblowers. She smiled easily, but her fingers still tapped lightly against her mug, always reading the room, always listening. Nathan watched her from the other side of the gravel path, sipping wine he'd bottled himself. He didn't need to chase power anymore. He'd finally learned how to grow something that didn't need to be owned to be valuable. That evening, after the last guest left, Ruth walked with Nathan between the rows of vines. The rain had returned, soft and steady, beating along the leaves. They didn't bring umbrellas. Neither of them minded. The land smelled of cedar and new life. They walked in silence until Ruth stopped near the base of the hill, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. She looked out at the rows they'd planted, green stretching into gray. Then she whispered, "We'll make it mean something." Nathan turned to her, rain running down his collar. His voice was quiet. "Steady. We already have." They stood like that for a moment, the ghosts between them finally still. Then Ruth nodded toward the gate near the road. "Did you finish the sign?" Nathan gave a small, tired smile. "Come see." They walked the last few yards in the darkening rain. At the edge of the road, beneath the lantern Nathan had wired himself, the new vineyard sign gleamed with fresh polish. It read, "Wyatt and Grant Wines for Flora, who taught us to begin again." Ruth ran her fingers across the letters, her breath catching slightly. No speeches. No tears. Just that. The kind of ending Flora would have loved.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit subscribe and check out our other thrilling stories on the channel. Leave a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from and what you think. Your support means everything to us. Until next time, stay tuned for more.